But if we don't address the process, you're going to blame technology again and again when it's actually on you because you don't have good processes in place and compliance to that.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Lead.exe, where you're hacking the leadership code. I'm Brian Comerford.
And I'm Nick Lozano. Today we're joined by our... okay, Brian. Yeah, you say whatever you want.
Today we're joined by our buddy Ryan Deeds. We're gonna talk data.
Woohoo! It's like my favorite thing. It's weird, right? Like, insurance thing gets me excited, and it just feels depressing. I mean, it's like it's sexy to me, and then I look at that, I'm like, wow, that's terrible. That's not what I thought it would be, early on in my life.
Well,
So Ryan, thanks for joining us again. You were on one of our earlier seasons, but if anyone's not familiar with you, if you could just do a real quick rundown of who you are, a little bit of your background, maybe just a couple minutes.
Sure, absolutely. I'm Ryan. I started with insurance agencies in the early 2000s, 2002. Been pulling data out, trying to use data to value for the past 20 years in my agency career. I worked with independent agents. I was CIO of 2 of them before I moved over to Assurex Global, running data strategy for them, which is a conglomerate of about 110 agencies, and did some cool stuff there. And then I got invited to kind of join an insurtech startup that was addressing this very specific problem. And I was like, yes, please, let me come on board. And so that's where I find myself today, working in an insurtech startup called Enable. And, our whole goal is to make the data journey for insurance agencies easier, faster, and more impactful.
That's beautiful.
I used to also have a podcast. I had a kid. We lived in Florida. We can keep going, but
oh yeah,
that's the main.
You used to have long hair.
I'm throwing it out, bro. It's coming back.
It's coming back. It's making a comeback.
Nice.
That's right.
A comeback. I've been here for years.
Well, I imagine.
Brian, we're both growing.
I'm giving it my best shot, man. This is like 10 days right here. Well, I imagine that you're not going to be able to work many more places because, lately your routine has been every place that you work, you get a tattoo. So, I mean, pretty soon you're going to look like, the illustrated man.
Yeah, it's funny because, anybody that knows me, I would consider myself kind of a deep dude. And I think about this whole work and life experience that we kind of go through and how much I identify with the job that I do, these jobs have really put me in a position to enhance my life and to create value for my family and drive that forward. They're intrinsically linked to my story. There is Ryan Deeds without it, but I don't know what that looks like, right? I mean, I'm an insurance agency data person. That's at the end of my life, that's going to be a gigantic section of it. And so, and for Enable, so when I got to Assurex, it was just like such an honor to be invited to that and to be able to join them that it totally made sense. And then Enable, I have some ownership in Enable, and I had fought my whole career with agencies to try to get ownership and equity. And then I go to Enable and I'm able to get that. And I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is the chance. And so it did. It really made sense for me. And I knew that at some point in time, it would be a good conversation starter. You're sitting there on the table, drinking a beer. What's that? Okay, let's talk, And so that was kind of the deal. I don't know how many more of those I will get, but who knows, man? Maybe a little teardrop or something. Maybe I can sell it. Like, hey, I'll come and work for you.
That's right.
$300,000. I'll get like a big.
I love it, like a race car driver.
Sponsorship,
yeah.
Right? You're already sponsoring them.
That's right. Yeah. Exactly correct.
That's beautiful. Well, talking with Ryan Deeds about data is, it's like eating a pizza because even when it's bad, it's still pretty good. So, Ryan's one of those rare breeds who can definitely put the sexy factor in a conversation about data. So I'm excited to kind of go down that path with you today. You recently made a post on LinkedIn that I thought was really impactful. And for you, it was amazing because it was so succinct. So that's kind of another curveball that I wasn't expecting from you. But, really the nature of that was the journey of getting from data to value. And, we continue to, it seems like, for the last 2 decades, data has continued to be this big buzz term. And everyone is still trying to figure out how to, really harness that and make it impactful for their own businesses across so many different industry types, and of course, the insurance domain, that you're positioned in, it's one that has struggled with it for a long time, but it feels like it's starting to get to a tipping point. So I love that you kind of broke that post down into all of these different personas and how their definition of what the meaning of data, really translates into. So I'd kind of like to go through that and just kind of talk about what that journey looks like.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know, man. I felt like there's been a tipping point for the last 5 years, 8 years, right? Like I keep waiting for like that to finally fall over and everybody be like, yes, there's massive amounts of value in our data. We know we need to get it right. We need to spend the operational cost on getting it. But I still don't see it. I think data is still a hype word. I think that it's, unless data modifies behavior, that's where I'm at now is like, it's got to create some kind of modification of behavior. It cannot be a backing up of a gut feeling or, hey, I'm just checking this. It's really got to help with prescribed behavior. And so I was thinking through that, and I think when an executive says we need to use our data, that what they really mean from their level is there is insight into how we can make our business better, how we can sell more, how we can be more efficient, and we can glean that information and we can then put that to use. I think that's when they say data, that's what they mean. And I think it's really challenging for the rest of the individuals in that chain to get to that place if those executives, they want the result. Oftentimes they don't want the expense and the culture that helps drive that result, right? That's the issue. And so trying to illustrate each link in that chain was the genesis of that post. And because I'm spending so much time thinking about how to articulate that, because when we do say data, I think whatever your experience has been, that's kind of where you're going. And it's that holistic individual that's been at all those levels that can kind of see that and say, I know what you mean. That's not really what you're saying, though. You don't really want to do all of these things. You think in your mind that there's this treasure trove sitting in whatever system you have, and all you have to do is dig a little bit, and now just wisdom is pushed upon you. Because even in that executive scenario, for that individual to look at data, to take that, to conceptualize what they're going to do with it, and then to do behaviors, and then come back and test the behavior that they did to see if that drove the result, you're not seeing that's not happening very often. It's especially not in our industry. That's the dream case. Like I want that to happen. I want somebody to come up and be like, all right, Ryan, we want to grow. We want to grow new business only. We want to isolate that. We're going to use these 4 methods. We're going to come back and test our growth and see where we were, see what resonated, what didn't. And then we're going to make changes based on that. That never happens, right? It's literally like, hey, I know that there's value in there. I'm going to look at some stuff and I'm just going to osmotically get this. And
that's right. Where's the big
you have that
button?
Consumer challenge. Even if you have an right, exactly. Even on the dashboards, like the early dashboards that I built up in your upsell, it was awesome because remember Staples had the easy button, right? They had this easy button ad. And that's what I put on the dashboards is like, here's the easy button. And but it tried to lead them down the path to be able to see that. But it's still so reliant. I mean, you have two executives. One has been in the game for 50 years. One's been in the game for 30 years. One's a little more tech savvy than the other. They look at the same freaking dashboard. They look at the same data. Both take away different things. And maybe one's right, maybe the other's right. And trying to correct for that, I think is really challenging. And so, when somebody says data to me, I just kind of like, we got to dig into what that means for you. How capable are you of leveraging, even if you deliver every insight in? I mean, how many times have you actually created good analytics that's never been used? I've guaranteed I have created more valuable shit that's never been leveraged than I've created valuable stuff that has been leveraged. I mean, some of the stuff I've created that has helped has been awesome, but there's a lot of stuff that are like, we really need this, and you're like, I delivered that exact thing, and I even went beyond. I delivered what you really meant me to deliver, not what you asked for, and here it is, and they never ever use it.
That's right, and you were in the test group, and you never even logged in.
I mean, and I mean, is your guys' experience in that similar? I mean,
oh, absolutely. Yeah, I remember.
I'd say that's like anything technology, right? Like you come to build a solution, this is the whiz-bang thing that's going to solve everything, and then nobody uses it, right?
Well, and I think, and there's so many different things here that you have to really break down, like I really like talking to agencies first and foremost before we even do anything. Like, I don't want to pitch product. I want to understand, are you dealing with 7 different projects this year? Do you have a stack of operational stuff and you saw a new shiny ball that you just want to throw on top and your ops team has no idea how they're going to implement that and put that to use? Where are you in this maturity level? Are we just in this like cyclical kind of a buy because my buddy said it was cool and now I'm not really going to use it and I'm going to blame you because I didn't use it? And so I like to sit down with them and say, let's talk through your culture. Let's talk through where you're at, what you're doing, what do you hope to gain, what are you losing out on today that you see that's creating fear? I mean, in our space, generally, it's benchmarking, right? I mean, it really is. Like if most agency principals are driven to analytics from the customer need perspective because they want to have they want to be able to educate the consumer and sell with data in lieu of selling on the golf course, right? They want to be able to say, these are the coverages for your industry. These are the claims incidents. This is the frequency and severity, to really come across as an educated seller and help that consumer feel comfortable about making that purchase decision. But so many times you don't have the data in the system to be able to do that, or you don't have the amount of data. And so then it comes back to this operational analytics that I have very nebulous thoughts about because it's so dependent upon the consumer of it to do something with it, So that's when I think about leadership in data. That's what I think about. I think about all those things that we just talked through, and then I as you go down that chain, trying to understand where each person plays, and I think I laid out like a perfect scenario where you might have one employee that does each one of those tasks, and the reality is you have a leader that's devoting 2.5% to IT, all of IT, maybe 3% if you're lucky, right? And they've got 2 people in there doing 17 different jobs. They don't give the ability to have good documentation, good security, good scalability. That the person behind the scenes trying to create value, they create something valuable. The executive is actually like, oh, this is badass. We need more of this. We need 10 of these. You have no time to shore it up. You've kludged this thing together. You have a fear that the shit's going to break because it was built so rapidly. You already know that it didn't have the scale, but now they've kind of got addicted to this small piece of wind that they found, and they just want more of it right now. I mean, and so just trying to break that down for everybody, because I mean that's the reality that I've lived in every organization. Right now is the first time I've ever been in an organization that has the staffing that's appropriate, that has the technical talent that's there, that has the data minds behind it. I mean, we have engineering teams that just do this stuff. We have a data team that just does data and rules and integrity checking. We have a front end team that just does the front end. We have QAs and documentation people. I mean, that was me. in whatever shop I was in, maybe one helper, right? Like, and I sure as hell didn't document shit. I mean, that was never my strong suit, you know?
I think we're all guilty of the documentation part, right? You're building something, and you're like, no, I just need to build this. I don't have time to write down what I'm doing and build it at the same time.
Well,
So I feel you on that.
yeah, that's part of the. I mean, that's part of the responsibility of the organization. I mean, if you're like, we want to leverage data. How many data people do you have? A half. You have a half of a data person,
Right.
right? Well,
0.25.
Right. But she's retiring in 6
so you
weeks.
right. Exactly. And she has all the institutional knowledge, but we need you to take and to make all that intuition into code. Yeah, you can get that done within a month.
Oh, by the way, it's an Access database on her actual computer that's like 15 years old.
That's right. And the OS is sold. We can't actually back it up.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that it is such a challenge because inversely, I think sometimes, if you're a data engineer and you're trying to provide value to the business and you haven't embraced the business, and if you haven't gone in and spent time in the domain to understand what the major threats are, the major revenue drivers are, the main things are, then the way that you prepare, collect, and get that data together may not be conducive to that end goal. There's been oftentimes, especially early on, when I would build out infrastructure without an understanding, they would say, hey, we want this report. Okay, I'm going to go get these 5 elements. I'm going to bring it over. And they're like, no, this isn't what I needed. Well, this is exactly what you asked for, though, right? But it didn't solve the business problem because I didn't understand the business problem. So then it's slowing down as that data engineer, figuring out how are you going to use this data? Like, what's your best case scenario? I generate something for you. You have something. What's your next step in that? If it's to say, my gut was right, maybe that's not, let's not waste all the time and do all this stuff. If it's to say, okay, we have low performing producers that have not sold business in the past 4 years, we're going to put them on a remediation plan. And if they don't correct, then we're going to get rid of them. We're going to spread those accounts out. We're going to become more profitable, bring in more. If there's a plan of action based on what they're seeing. And so typically now when I'm talking to individuals, especially in agencies, that's what I want to know is like, all right, we generate this for you. What are the 3 best case scenario? No real insight. Like everything's okay. Worst case scenario. Worst case scenario. What are you changing when you realize the worst case scenario? What are the things that you are willing to do to correct that? And a lot of times there's not an answer for that. They have to go back and really think about what they are willing to do. Are you going to fire a $1 million producer that's retired in place, that's not generating new revenue, but does have a large book of business and a lot of relationships? And if not, then don't look at that data point. Let's figure out what's relevant that's going to actually make you move that needle some. But those are all very advanced conversations that I think you have to take a lot of beatings to get to the place to have that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you said it earlier, where are you on the maturity curve? And that is, I think, a really critical, it's a really critical question.
Because I think so much of it is driven by FOMO. I mean, I really do. I think that just like crypto right now, I mean, the NFTs are FOMO, man. I mean, it's FOMO. I don't want to miss out. And, and I don't know why, but business people don't always tell the full truth. Like they'll bring a product in, they'll be like, man, this product changed our whole lives. Like CEOs will talk to each other. They'll be like, this thing was like the rainbow unicorn Pegasus, like doing all the things. You get on the phone with the COO and you're like, yo, can you walk me through that? And they're like, yeah, we installed that with 3 people. 2 of them used it. They liked it okay. They used it for a day, And so sometimes that FOMO is not even real. It's you got to break that down quite a bit to figure out what's the reality behind it. But that's what I think drives a ton today. It's just fear of missing out and fear of not getting value.
Another component of that FOMO, I think, is it's the showing off mentality. It's we've got that too. Actually, we're even better than all of our competitors. We've got this technical maturity, and we've got all these great bells and whistles, and none of those things may even exist, or if they do, it's kind of to your point, they're untouched. Like who actually utilizes them to do anything with those tools?
Well, I mean, and I think that's true. I think that that it is about trying to make sure that they remain competitive and remain relevant, and that the latest tools. I think a great question to ask, at least, and again, I don't have, you guys probably have different experiences than I do because I've really lived only in the insurance industry, agency space, you know, is do you have a target client? Which has nothing to do with technology, nothing at all. But if they have gone down the path of identifying what their perfect target client is, it talks about an operational maturity. They can turn down risk, they can turn down certain things that don't fit. And generally, that is a really good indicator of where they're headed, what they're willing to do, the things that they're really wanting to drive forward. Because if they haven't even done that, if it's, we write everything, we do everything for everybody, that's a good indication to me that they're not going to be willing to do what's needed to leverage this data to value, to really drive those core initiatives that have to take place. I mean, none of this shit is like a 2-week journey, right? I mean, this is every place I was in, it took 2 years. I went into Crichton, I had a 5-year plan at Crichton, and it took 5 years to recognize that plan. It really did. But at the end of my time there, we were rocking and rolling and better than I could have ever imagined. Everything that you want as a data person was coming to fruition. Folks were engaged, using it to value. It helped account managers, manage their lives. It really, really was beneficial. And I think from a technology perspective, that's our whole goal. We want to make the employees' lives better. Yes, we want to be efficient for the company, but on a human element, we have the ability to make employees' lives better, right? Take away the crap work, get rid of that. And when that can actually happen, which I think is rare, those are the magic moments that sometimes will drive a career and really stick with you and keep you sustained through lean times when that doesn't happen.
That was some of a question you actually hit on. What I was going to ask you is understanding what your client or your customer or whatever it is looking for, right? I don't know, like in my experience in data projects in the past, it's like, hey, we need this, but then you go do all your interviews, you start doing your research, and it's nothing the client or the customer even wants. And you're kind of spinning your wheels and you wasted all that time instead of starting in the front and making sure that you're actually solving a problem that needs to be solved instead of creating a solution and then finding a problem to put that solution to.
How many times have you been there and said, well, what data do you want? We want all of it. Why? Well, because we're gonna use the hell out of that data. Like you recognize that 90% of your data is garbage. I mean, why don't we pull out the things that are important? Why don't you give me 4 use cases on how we can make something specific better? Bring that out. See if the culture adopts that. Work on that specific issue, right? And then we can go get other things that we have gaps in. But I think too often it's the other way. I think that is changing some now as people have got. I mean, we've gone, like you said, Brian. I mean, we've gone through 20 years of getting burned by the promise of data delivering value to us. And every company out there and all the executives, I think, are in that boat. Like, we've heard this story before. We've heard data's going to save the world. Data's going to do all this. It's the new gold. But I haven't seen that. Most of these guys have invested, have tried, and haven't netted that gain. And so, in a lot of cases, they're just like, yeah, nah, we're good. We're solid. Yeah, data's cool. We can use it. But having Sally run that report and take her 3 days is fine for us. We know how to use that information. You coming in and doing all this crazy stuff, it may not be, we're just resistant to it. And I think it's fair because I think that we promise as technologists, you put a minimal effort in and you get a big result out. And that is not the way we should pitch anything ever. You're going to work your ass off. You're going to have to change a lot of stuff. You're going to go through a lot of pain. You're going to be lost a lot of time. And then 2 or 3 years down the road, you're going to wake up and be like, okay, shit changed. And it was a slow grind to get there. And now we're at value. Now we can actually see our employee retention's going up. Our employee satisfaction is better. We're servicing our clients. We understand what they need. Those are the types of large buckets that are actually solved. But how many times have you gone to an 18-month project and they're like, yeah, we're not doing this anymore. It's not getting us there. And you're like, well, that's because you're only halfway through,
Yeah, I think there's another component of it that's often overlooked, which is it's not like a process that just gets completed. There's a continuation that has to be part of the cultural and behavioral change of everyone who suddenly has to become, a curator and a data steward. That's how you keep, empowering the growth and scalability and the quality.
Well, and that's why I think about cultural adoption so much. I mean, when I think about my greatest success as a data person, it was absolutely at Crichton because what we could do is we could deliver the audits back to the end user almost immediately within a day, right? They entered bad data. They did something that they shouldn't have done. They missed a field. And again, this is not negligence on this part. This is not them saying, screw you, I'm not doing it. This is because they're doing 15 hours of work in 8. This is because they have 3 producers yelling at them. This is because they've got 24 renewals they have to be done right now, And so the tool that we created for that was this thing that would show them the mistakes that were made the day before. We'd only ever show them 5 at a time, but they would, on their little dashboard, they'd have a graph that said, hey, these are the audits that we found. And ultimately, they really liked it because it would help with the NO, it would help with retention, it would keep them out of trouble with the producers, and it would also then train them really, really effectively. Hey, I had to go and correct this 7 times this week. That 8th time, they remember that field. It just becomes a part of the flow. When you don't do it that way, when you don't have a mechanism for that, they have a hard time understanding first, what did they miss? Why is that important that I missed it? And so much gets put on our employees, and I really think it's leadership teams, because how have you helped your employee find that stuff that is important? How have you helped educate them? How have you empowered them to do this kind of work and get that right? And if you haven't, then that's on you, man. I mean, Sally can't remember 500 fields to fill out and the right cancel reason to use and this thing and that thing. I mean, it's impossible. And so how, as a leader, have you helped your organization handle that? Because if you can't handle that, then you're going to have a hard time having data strategy long term.
Yeah, so I'll jump in with another comment there. This is, I guess, one of the roles or personas that was not included in your list. But it's the starting point of where that data comes from, right? It's like the input person. What is the point of origin for it? And many times, going back to the leadership component of this, what tends to happen is there's no management put in place to ensure that the data quality is a process of continuation. I remember building a dashboard that gave what if scenarios for salespeople and showing it to the executives. They wanted some kind of what if scenario so that they could actually, start to figure out, how do we fine tune our budget? And all of it was hooked into the CRM system, which, of course, the first response is, well, hey, we're looking at these numbers, like all that stuff's wrong. Okay, but it's what's in the system. Well, yeah, but you're going to have to fix that. I mean, the dashboard isn't showing the stuff, that needs to be there. Okay, well, why is it wrong? Well, because nobody's been updating it. Okay, well, that's not, it's not a tech guy problem. That's not that's not an issue with the visualization tool. That's a management problem because you're not actually enforcing the behaviors with your people.
Well, I mean, I agree, man. It's just like we said. I mean, it's leadership. It's you got to go through pain to get the result. If you don't go through the work, I mean, and that's always been my fear. Like, I hate validating data on visualizations because, if you validate on visualizations, so say that you have your dashboard and you're going to use it and you say, hey, I'm putting it out there, and they're supposed to spend a couple months making sure the data's right. They learn to distrust that mechanism on the onset, so I do shit in Excel first. Let's pull it out. Let's analyze this in Excel. Let's make sure our buckets are right. And if not, we're not going to go through the visualization build phase because, just like you said, I mean, and I run into this at Enable, right? So we have producer goals. So you can go in and you can set producer goals. Well, producer goals is written numbers, right? So you're never going to judge a producer, at least for an annual goal, based on billings. You're always going to be on new enforced policies at time of bind. What was that amount? But the number of agencies that actually have a good handle and the ability to make that work is very, very limited. So, from our perspective, you have to qualify for that specific screen if your written numbers are within a margin of error with your billings over time. And if they're not, you don't qualify for the screen because it will just confuse everybody. It'll invalidate the platform. And then they don't know, okay, this number over here is right, but these numbers over here are wrong. And so I'm very, very cautious about what we show and how we show it and who gets access to what, because I don't want to commingle. I mean, we can tell really, really good information from billings, and if they had good written, we could do some really cool stuff with it, but you can't base your value proposition on an analytics tool on written numbers when the vast majority don't have good written numbers. And so that was kind of our solve for that. But that's the struggle, is like, how do you get everybody behind it? But it's a leadership from top down, right? I mean, it's got Cooper Jones. He was the best. He was one of the best leaders I ever worked with, for sure. And he made it a priority. He went in and he talked to the people. He told them what their advantage was, what would they get out of it, what was he looking for out of that data, what would be the detriment if they didn't comply. I mean, and so we had this whole thing, and it took 6 months for us to put together, working with HR, getting the incentive plans, getting the de-incentive plans, figuring all that out so we could have that conversation with the staff about it and have them buy in. Because that's the other thing, Brian. I think if your analytics if the person being judged on the analytic is not responsible for driving the analytic, it's invalidated almost immediately. And we see that in retention all the time. I want to judge an account manager on retention. Really? Because how much... you don't keep bad servicing account managers. You fire them. And that's the only reason typically an account manager would lose an account, is if their service sucked, right? If their prices if they didn't renew in time, I mean, if there are certain things slipping through the cracks, you could see that. But you're going to get rid of those or do corrective action. It's not because we didn't have this market. That's not their fault. That client got acquired. That's not their fault. I mean, and so like that's been something I've been asked all the time, is we want to incentivize and give our account managers money if they retain, and if they don't, we want to do clawbacks and this different stuff. I'm like, well, that's not fair, because they don't have control of that analytic. You can define the behaviors that drive that. If they comply to the behaviors that drive that for you organizationally, you can incentivize them on the compliance of the behavior. That works effectively. But then they're like, well, that's a whole lot of work. Well, yeah, because you're judging the behaviors, not the result. You want to look at a result that has a myriad of reasons behind it, and then associate and judge that individual for that. That's the quickest way to get employee engagement decreased, by doing that kind of stuff.
I like how you did the rapid prototyping, basically, that you don't want to spend the time building a BI without, or any intelligence platform, without working the numbers in Excel first. And I think that's a great point, right? Like, why put all that time and effort without making sure the numbers are correct, or that you're even presenting something that's even useful? So I think it's a great point that organizations, even if you don't have a large budget, like you said, is you can just start doing this stuff in Excel. Well, it's not an ideal long-term solution. It's a great starting point, right?
And I use that shit all the time. I mean, I don't care. If you come to me and you're like, hey, let's do a technical project. We've never done this before. We don't have a process. We're going to invent the process and the technology. I'm like, no, we're not. If I'm on the project, we're not. What you're going to do is you're going to lay out the process. You're going to do this in the most simple, basic way possible. And it's probably going to involve Excel. It's probably going to involve you filling out some stuff. And then we're going to have that process. We're going to figure out the gaps in that process. And then we're going to bring in technology on top of that to make that better and make that more fluid. Because if you don't do that, what you never know is, am I fighting with a lack of technology and technological problems, or is it process and compliance issues? And typically it's a combination of the two, but process and compliance to process is a bigger challenge than almost anything else. So, and that I learned that lesson after I implemented my 5th CRM that failed. Right? I was just tired of it. I was so sick of bringing in CRMs saying, oh, we're going to use this. It's going to be awesome. They would not have incentives or de-incentives. They wouldn't do the right stuff. And so when Crichton, I was a year in at Crichton, they said, we need a CRM, Ryan. I was like, okay, but we're going to do it the way that I want to. And you're going to have your producers fill out Excel sheets, submit them into the manager every month, every week, whatever that process looks like. That's how we're going to do it. And they push back. Well, it's not enough. It doesn't give them enough. Like, the CRM ain't for them in an insurance agency 90% of the time. It's for you to track a behavior that they're complying to justify their existence if they're not hitting goals. Because those producers that hit goals, you don't give a damn about their CRM. You don't care at all. You just care about that money. I have a validating producer. I don't know where their time is going. I need to justify to make sure their activity is correct. That's why a CRM is in place. And every one of those producers knows that. And so let's get the process right. Then we can build a very, very simple CRM that does that, or we can do whatever we need to. But if we don't address the process, you're going to blame technology again and again when it's actually on you because you don't have good processes in place and compliance to that. Because that's the problem that I see more than anything else with software is we're going to bring the solution in. Everybody's going to use it this way, and we're going to get massive amounts of value. And you bring it in, nobody uses it that way. They get no value out of it, and they say, that software sucked. You're like, bro, what's up?
Sometimes the software does suck, by the way.
It does. I mean, but I would say that more often than not, I don't care about the wrench. Don't care. I don't care. I don't care. Show me an agency that's using AMS poorly, that has good training, good onboarding, continual training, updates that software, actually allocates budget and time to making sure that their account managers and their staff knows how to leverage that. You will never find it. It does not happen because what happens is, hey, we're going to bring an AMS in. We have it in place. We hire Ben, the new account manager. We sit Ben down with Sally, who's been using the system for 10 years. Osmotically, Ben learns from Sally bad process. Sally's like, this system sucks because she's using something that was, done away with 4 years ago, but the agency never educated them on that. So, or they showed them one time and didn't continue to push that in there. And then everybody's like, every AMS out there sucks. I'm like, not really. I mean, most AMSs do pretty much the same things. There's a lot of similarities. The way that you invest in your talent, your people, your training, that sucks. Train talent, really do it the right way. At that point in time, if you come to me and say, we need to make an AMS change, I'll say, okay, you really maximize this when you're using this to full value. And the 3 advantages that this system gives you over that system, you're going to actually leverage. But I've never had that conversation. That's never happened. It's always been, hey, we're going to change the AMSs because we think this one's terrible. I'm like, well, in 3 years, you're going to think that one's terrible too. So, because you're going to do the same damn thing,
I feel like some of that's with any technology, right? If you don't spend the time investing in onboarding, certain tools look like the whiz-bang thing, like we could be talking about CRM like Salesforce, right? Everyone's like, you buy Salesforce, you get what you need out of it. Well, if your processes are crap and your onboarding sucks, it's going to be terrible. So that's all great points that you made up that, organizations should really invest that time in training the employees, why it's important, why Sally puts us in here, why it's important for this to be correct, how their contributions from their level, contribute to the overall success of the organization.
I think the product person for Outlook must be the maddest motherfucker ever. He just must be so mad. Because when you think about all the power that Outlook provides, all the things that it does, it is a very robust tool that can really just do an amazing amount of task management, collaboration. But the users use about 20% of that, and they have this super big product that you just use this little bit about. And it's because of that. It's because of a culture and that's the most common used software in any one of our organizations. And generally it's, I know how to sort, I know how to search, I know how to move stuff to folders. If I go beyond that, I'm Googling it, I'm doing YouTube. And it's funny because you have a rock star account manager that knows how to do like 3 extra things because they watched a YouTube video for like 8 minutes. And now they're like, oh, you got to talk to this genius. And in my opinion, they are a genius because they're doing what needs to be done. They're shoring up their organization's lack of operational ability to train and bring value to that tool. And it drives me nuts because that is what I think holds us back from really maximizing this stuff. I mean, we get such a marginal return on the investment of technology, but it's because we put in a marginal amount of work to try to elicit that out of there.
So let me ask you a question about organizations that want to start the journey from data to value. And they know that they've got to allocate some budget. They know they're going to have to hire some resources, but they don't know where to start. What are a couple of the foundational pieces that they're going to need to put into place to even begin the journey?
I mean, again, I think it's first self-awareness, right? I mean, I think that's the first thing. It's having the self-awareness to really do a deep audit on your organization and understanding what's the core things to your organization. do you want to use data to value? Do you want to maximize the use of this new software? Do you want to help customers? Whatever that looks like, you've got to be able to define that culturally, because that I think is going to set the framework. I really want to get our people efficient on there for like 3 years. I don't know if you guys remember, I'm sure there was this big push on maximization of current infrastructure, right? We want to use all the things that we have and we want to use them as good as possible. We really don't want redundancies. We want to remove redundancies. We want to leverage it to maximum value. And I think that was a good initial push, but you have to step back and say, okay, first we're going to stop bringing on new stuff. We're going to look at some of the processes that we have in place. But again, you have to bounce it off of what your goals are, right? So you have to kind of define what your goals are first to say, this is what we want to be. This is what we want to do. So I think step one is being self-aware and kind of laying out okay, this is where we want to be. Why we're having this conversation is obviously because we've seen something in the market that's doing something that we're not. We feel like we're missing out on something. We're not as efficient as we should be. We're not selling as... So whatever those things are that brought you to this place to have that conversation, lay that out clearly. At that point in time, you can say, okay, so if we're not being as efficient as we want, then does that mean that we are not leveraging our current technology the best that we can? Does that mean that we don't have enough technology? Does that mean that we have too much technology and people are going all over the place? You got to start drilling that down a little bit, because once you identify that second layer, so I want to become more efficient. We have a lot of technology in place. We don't think people leverage it effectively. Okay, so that points pretty strongly to, let's start really, really dedicated training and showing the end user how this kind of stuff is going to drive value and make their lives better, But I think there's not just a one answer fits all for that. It's kind of having a deep dive with that team that says, what's brought us to this point? Why are we having these conversations? And a lot of times it's stopping behaviors, and it's hard to stop. I mean, we had this thing where you could not bring any new technology in for a year, and it wasn't me. It was like producer X saying, I can't sell because I don't have this tool, or director Y saying, well, we're getting beat in the marketplace because we don't have these three things. Because we would just go buy the shit, we wouldn't have an operational plan for it. We would demo it with a couple of users and we'd forget about it because we were moved on to the next shiny object. So we knew that we had an efficiency problem and a confusion problem with our end users. And so we said, okay, we've got to first, they have to have faith that we're not just going to be changing stuff every day. Because if we do, they ain't learning this. There's no point for them to learn some stuff right now that they know is going to change within a year. They're not going to invest the time regardless of what you do. So you're going to have to go back, have those conversations, reset that strategy, figure out where you are and what those goals are, and then break it down from there. And it's not as clean an answer as I'd like to provide, but that's the reality of it, I think.
I think it's a great answer. And I know we're coming up here on time, so we're going to, speaking of time, we're going to put you on the clock for your 60-second leadership hack. So I'm going to share a screen, and this is going to be a leadership hack, personal hack, or just technology related in general. And once you see the timer going, you are on the clock. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
If you want access to Ryan Deed's 60-second leadership hack, then you're going to want to head on over to our website and join our leadership hacking crew. You can do that by heading on over to pages.leadexe.com/join. And for those of you watching on YouTube, I'll put the link down here in the video. And those of you listening in podcast format, I'll add it in the show notes. But if you head over there and join our leadership hacking crew, not only will you get access to Ryan Deed's 60-second leadership hack, but you will get access to all of our previous guests' 60-second leadership hack. So head on over there, join up. Some great stuff coming your way, and we look forward to you joining our crew. Perfect. And with that, Ryan, that's a great place to wrap up. If people are looking for you, what's the best way to get a hold of you? LinkedIn, email,
Tinder.
Company website? Tinder? Okay. That's the first recommendation we've gotten.
No, absolutely. LinkedIn is there. Ryan Deeds, LinkedIn, Ryan@enable.com. That's where you can find me. Maybe Grindr.
And real quick, Enable, you touched on it a little bit. Do you just want to do a quick couple seconds, let people know what Enable is in case that's a product they're looking for?
I'd say for insurance agencies, we make data easier. We accelerate your data journey. We will help figure out where you are with data today, and we will make it faster. And if you've got data issues, data concerns, I don't care about selling you Enable that much. I care about helping you out as an agency. I'd love to talk to you. And Ryan@enable.com.
Perfect. Appreciate your time, Ryan. As always, great conversation. Brian, do you have anything else you want to add on?
I'll just do some shadow puppets since you guys can't hear most of what I'm saying anyway.
I didn't catch most of that. So, Ryan, thank you. It's been a pleasure as always. Thanks for your time, man.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you, guys.